question I asked him yesterday was, how could I have served you better for you not to have left me? And his answer was, Laura, I didn't know you had that as an option for me. Like, I didn't know you could do a buy before you sell. I knew that, you could sell my house and you could help me buy a new one.
Yeah, I kind of came up in that, so to speak, in that mindset, or in that kind of world where it's just like, you got to run. And if you're nice and whatever, you're not going to make it. Even though these people who over here were nice, who had really good businesses, that's all fluff and it's all pretend. It's not really happening.
All right. So today we are reading The Go-Giver, the expanded edition, and we are going over, depending on how your chapters are named.
I was wondering that myself.
Yes. So the intent was to read through actual chapter 5, which, if your chapter started on the intro as chapter 1, was actually chapter 7. So I don't know if we all got to the same spot. I did make it all the way through, but I'm not sure if everybody else did, because I'm not sure if everybody else got that. I didn't realize till this morning when I was listening, I was like, wait a second, that's not matching up. So anyway.
I figured I went with the book when they were saying chapter 5 on the book, and that was chapter 7 on the thing. So
Okay. So then
they were quick chapters, so it was all right.
Yeah, they were easy. So anyway, that's what we'll be talking about today. And Alicia, your book, your first few chapters, the floor is yours, my friend.
Yes. So my best friend actually brought me this book at Christmas time, and she wrote something very sweet in there. She said, "My twin, you are everything good this book speaks to." And I almost cried. So I figured I had to read it. I started reading it, and then it was my turn. So I thought we would maybe depart a little bit from the highly analytical, do this. And so we have started more of a story type book this week. So it starts a little slow. It starts out different from the other one so far. But I felt like as the story continues, you start to care more and more about the character, like starting a show on Netflix or something. The first episode's like, ugh, and then you start to care more and more. So this story is about Joe. When we meet Joe, he's kind of at the height of his deals crumbling. He's got to meet his quota. He works, all of his deals are very high stakes, high rewards. And so he sees the world as dog eat dog, and it's very corporate for him. He makes a comment in the beginning about there's a nice girl that works on his floor, and that because she's nice, she'll never make it in their world. So that's where we kind of start off in the book. For me, I think when he got to that point, I pushed pause, and it made me think, like, there's that mindset in real estate. Do you guys see that as well?
I think so. I think when I started, my mentor who brought me into his team, we were phone animals. And like 8:30 every morning, it was rock and roll, phone. And it was just run. And we saw other teams that were employing this kind of stuff, and it was almost like, that's too handholdy, it's too wishy-washy, it's too whatever. This is what we do. We're renegades. We run. I kind of came up in that, so to speak, in that mindset, or in that kind of world where it's just like, you got to run, and if you're nice and whatever, you're not going to make it. Even though these people who over here were nice, who had really good businesses, that's all fluff and it's all pretend. It's not really happening. Like, this is the only way to do it. So it's prevalent, in real estate.
I think it's probably at the forefront of most people's minds. I think that when you hear about the modern agent, that's the agent that doesn't believe it's dog eat dog. I think that's a concept of a new wave of thinking, because like, you take people like Casey Rutherford and Mike, right? Price. Mike is a phone person. Casey is a social media person. To talk to Mike, his perspective would be dog eat dog. Well, Mike's been in real estate for, a lot longer, 10 plus years.
Right.
Then Casey, who's 5 years into her business, she's substantially younger. She has a different perspective on things. And she'll tell you, I don't get on the phone. People just come to me because I'm nice, which is like the whole premise of the first chapter of the book. Is it's not dog eat dog. You just can be nice, and you can be kind, and you can give, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I think that the dog eat dog is definitely the old way of thinking. And I am glad that the modern agent is becoming more relevant, and that thought process is becoming more relevant than what it once was.
Right.
I guess not specific to real estate. So this one was very interesting from the standpoint of, I've always just seen consistency work, not necessarily, I guess, nice versus not necessarily as nice. But I guess consistency just works so often, I guess consistently nice would end up working really well.
So for me, when he said that in the story, I always perceive real estate agents to be dog eat dog. And so for me, it really like illuminated a bulb or a heartbeat or whatever you want to call it. Because so everybody's your big why and YEXP. So for me, my big why is not necessarily to sell a bunch of real estate, but to actually be giving in a way to other people. So that excited me about this book. But then when they likened to dog eat dog is like, that's my whole YEXP. Because from my experience in real estate, I've seen the inside of Sotheby's, Better Homes and Gardens, Redfin, right? The discount brokerage. And so I see all of those having been like that, dog eat dog. There's little secret meetings of agents who are top producing, who get special leads, who get special treatment, who get this, who get that. And if you're not in, you're not in. And so my big YEXP is that it's not like that. When I met Laura, she was like, I have leads to give away. And, the way EXP is structured is we want each one of us to succeed. And so they push you to achieve that. And so that got me excited to keep with the book, even though it was more story oriented. So that got me excited. I'm curious to see what happens in the end. But for me, that's how I related. That's why I picked this one. This one got me a little bit excited. So
I actually like the story part of the book because someone who learns on the side of the brain that I use more organically, a story is easier for me to actually follow. And my most favorite self-help book out there is called The Traveler's Gift. And it's
Love that book. Love that book.
It's a short, like I can read it, me with my eyeballs and not listening, in about a 5-day time frame, just sitting on the beach. And that is like, yep, there it is. It's like my go-to self-help book to remind myself that, the premise of that story is you kind of make it happen, right? You got to step up and make your own destiny and not accept what comes to you. But I love the story. Like it's a lot easier for me to follow the lesson than it is in the textbook type reads that we normally read.
So this book is set up very similar to the 5 a.m. Club, which is actually one of my favorites. And it's kind of a story form as well. And it was actually the first time I had heard one, and I actually kind of prefer them that way. So.
Oh, good. I'll stop apologizing. Cool. Good. So the next character we meet is Pinder, and he's this mysterious man, maybe a little bit kooky. And Joe is so desperate that he, there's a seminar coming up, but he's so desperate he picks up the phone and he's like, I've got to meet with you. I've got to do something. I've got to turn this around. And so Pinder agrees to meet with him. And he says, can you meet tomorrow? I'm available. We'll do whatever. And for Joe, this is very strange. Like, oh my gosh, he just has time for me. And who am I? He's letting me in. He feels very strange about being accepted that way. They meet the first day and he says, I want to share my 5 laws with you. And there's one condition. And the condition is that every day you have to test the law by actually trying it out the very same day. And he's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. And he even asks, how are you going to know if I don't? And Pinder's like, I won't, but you'll only be cheating yourself. And so it doesn't really matter to me. It should only matter to you. So he starts to get this like new mindset thrown at him. So it seems like every day he learns a law, he's going to meet someone different. So they go the first day to meet Ernesto. They call him the real estate mogul. And we find out, every time Joe meets someone, it's this big deal. Oh my gosh, the CEO. Oh my gosh, the real estate mogul. And he talks to them and they're so nice and approachable and they seem to have it all together. And then he finds out Ernesto started as a hot dog cart on the streets of New York. And he's like, how did you take every other hot dog that everybody else is selling and turn it into this amazing Italian restaurant? And we find out that it's through the law of value. And so his definition of that is to give more in value than you get in payment. And so he says, a bad restaurant gives just enough quality and quantity to justify the amount paid by the customer. A good restaurant gives the most value to justify the amount, and a great restaurant defies the imagination by giving quality of food and service, giving better quality of food and service than any amount of money could pay for. And so how do we go about translating that in real estate?
It hits every aspect. I mean, it hits every single aspect. You're taught, under promise, over deliver, under promise, over deliver. But I think that can go to every single facet of it. It's not just your clients. I mean, back to your point, Allie, it's to the agents that are looking for help or in reaching out, not doing more or less business than me, just the ones that are physically reaching out. It's remembering, birthdays. I mean, I've started a thing now where I keep $5 gift cards at my desk. Every month, Louis sends me on the 15th of the month. He sends me the birthdays of the people in our database for the next month. The parents just get a handwritten birthday card. The kids, they get a $5 coupon to Chick-fil-A. I mean, I don't have that many kids in my database, right? And we only went back a couple years. We didn't go back the full 8 years. But I think it's little things like that. It's having the answer when a client needs a hairdresser, right? Like that's kind of our value proposition. Everybody has all these lengthy, long value propositions. Mine has gone down to one word: yes. We are going over the Go Giver Expanded Edition, chapters 6 through 10. And Allie is our fearless leader on this book. So take the floor, my friend.
Yes, glad to see everybody's face. So this week I thought was maybe a little bit short, but last we saw or heard or read, we went over the law of value, which is to give more in value than you get in payment. We also heard the law of compensation, which is to enlarge the number that you serve, and that enlarges your return on investment, basically. And so where we picked up this week was we heard a little bit about Rachel's backstory, and she, as we know, is the cook at Pindar's house. She makes amazing coffee. They gave us a little sneak peek into her background, how hard she struggled just to take care of her family as a teenager, and that she's worked all of these very unique and demanding jobs and still managed to take care of her family, save money, and is now working to serve. And so we'll see how that pans out, I think, at the end of the book. So where we read this week was kind of where I got to over Christmas break. So the next week is a complete surprise for me. So that'll be exciting. What we heard after Rachel's backstory was the law of influence. So he goes to meet Sam with Pindar, and he is an insurance salesman, and his story of where he started is not unlike Joe, our main character. He was really struggling to figure out, he thought he was horrible at his job. He was trying to figure out his place in all of that. And his aha moment was he learned to develop a network. And the exact definition of that is what Laura says all the time. It's a group of people who know, like, and trust you. So I was glad to hear that repeated. Not that she's crazy, but she's a little crazy, but it was repeated word for word in this book. And so that was exciting to come across that. So his idea is to create a group of what he calls personal ambassadors. And the question is, how am I supposed to do that? And he references that same book, How Am I Supposed to Do That? The Never Split the Difference. He says, stop keeping score. Do not do win-win situations or 50-50. So that was cool to see this kind of come full circle too, that, splitting the difference still means both sides lose. Neither side is getting what they want because they're both so determined to get a little bit and only give a little bit that everybody walks away unhappy. So I'll kind of skip that question since we did a whole book on that. What he says after that is influence. So this one is the law of influence. And he says, influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first, which for me is kind of a weird way to word it, but it makes perfect sense. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that from your perspective, you guys.
So I think it's super relevant. I think putting the needs of others first will 100% of the time, you hear all the time, the more you give, the more you get. And it's not just in a monetary situation. a lot of times that equates to time or resources or other things. And then that's giving all of that is what kind of creates that ambassador list for you. And I actually kind of did a little bit of reverse of this past week. So I have a client who had something that came up super serious, like could change his life for the negative. He's got 5 kids that could change. I mean, he could go to jail, and it's a false allegation. But with everything that's transpired, I think he will be fine. However, like most grownups who have 5 kids and a life, he started panicking, right? And he called a company that does buy before you sell, because he wants to move out of his big house, move his wife and their personal kid, because they each have kids from a separate marriage that live in another house. And they don't need this big house. They only need truly space for them and the baby. And so his idea is, let's sell the big house. Let's simplify our lives. That way, if something does happen, this does come to fruition, and so that's where I started going to, because he didn't call me first. I've done like 4 transactions for this man. So to know that he did not, and we're very good friends. We talk on probably a monthly basis, if not more often than that. So to know that he was in this position, had all this going on. And my question I asked him yesterday was, how could I have served you better for you not to have left me? And his answer was, Laura, I didn't know you had that as an option for me. Like, I didn't know you could do a buy before you sell. I knew that, you could sell my house and you could help me buy a new one, but I didn't realize you could make the transition this way. And it was like, it was super eye-opening reading the chapter and talking about all of that, because part of giving value is making sure those humans that are your ambassadors have every piece to your puzzle. And so for me, I think that I have not been providing value outside of traditional real estate, or at least letting my clients know that I can provide that value outside of that traditional real estate. And it was like a knife to my heart when he was like, I just was not educated that you could do that for me. Now, he may end up firing his realtor now that he knows that I can do it. And that's like a whole nother story. But he did want to look at my program to be able to compare them, right? Now that he knows that I have that as an option. And so we'll see what ends up happening, because he's just kind of at the beginning stages. It's not like there's any transactions going on and they're still reviewing numbers and, signing contracts. But it was very saddening last night to know that I had not provided enough value to this client of mine who, like, when he called to tell me himself, because it was important that I heard it from his mouth that he was doing this transaction. So I think that value is you got to have it, because the two go hand in hand, in my opinion.
And the hard thing for you is, you probably know you follow up with him, talk to him all the time, send him mail or send him whatever. So he knows that you're in the space. And from what we think, and you saying that, I was already like, my next mailer going out is going to say all these things. That is the very next mailer is going out. Yes. Now, if you said that, because we just assume, and we don't know what we don't know. You know what I mean? So that is an eye-opening thing where we have to be, what we think is providing value is actually providing value. And that we're actually hitting people the right way with that, Like I always, post-close, it's always, you're going to need a roofer, you're going to need an HVAC person, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. I want you to call me. And I have people that call me all the time and they apologize. Like, I'm so sorry I'm calling you again. And I'm like, I told you to call me. That's why I'm here. I'm just not just taking a check of closing and run away. Like, you're my people for life. So that's your job. So like, some people get it, some people don't, so it's hard.
So he called the law of influence kind of like enlightened self-interest. I thought it was very interesting. He also kind of talked about, which I guess kind of framed my perspective a little different. Money and power don't create influence, but influence creates more money and power. And so,
I like that.
Right. And so it's like, it almost kind of debunks a couple of things. Like, a lot of people kind of say, what I hear often is, you have to have money to make money. And it's just like, this book, like all the few chapters we've read, almost kind of debunks that. If you don't have the money, you create the value, and just like, if you don't have the money is not necessarily saying you don't have the influence, because I think the influence is what comes first.
Yeah, I like that, Dave, and what you said reminded me of what they said in the book was that, or in the next section, actually, they go to this, like a TED Talk, basically. It's a speaker, and she actually attended as an audience member and had the courage to raise her hand with, how am I supposed to do that? And he says, if you want to make money provide value. If you want to make more money, provide more value. And she's like, what if you need more money fast? And his answer was provide more value fast. That was funny. And what you said, Laura, too, Steve said he's going to create a mailer. I was thinking as you were talking, that's exactly right. How do we market all of those? And it's not necessarily a niche, but it's things that people don't really think of until they're in that situation. So how do we put that out there? Everything that we do as real estate agents, I don't think would fit on a business card. So that's my wheels are turning of like, how do I market that value?
I know. Reels on social media.
We just have to market ourselves as problem solvers. You know what I mean? It's like perfect situation is you have to sell your house and put a sign in your house and everybody it's happy in 30 days. That's the perfect situation. That doesn't always happen. So let's sit down and figure out what the problem is and let's solve it, because we got a whole boatload of solutions. My job is to take care of you, however that is. I mean, I don't like doing rentals, but I've had family and friends that have needed to do rentals. Yeah, I don't want to, but you need me to open a door to show you a rental house, I'll do it. Family and friends. People off the street, no. Oh, I try to get, it's like, just call them directly to set up the contract. I want nothing to do with it. Anyway, we got to solve problems. You know what I mean? The more problems we solve, the better we're going to be, the longer we're going to do this.
Well, and I was joking a second ago, but not really. To your point, Alicia, we can't. And David, you can't either. You can't put every service you offer on a business card.
Mm-hmm.
However, all right, so we will get started today with our book club review of the Go Giver chapters 11 through 15. Allie, take it away.
So we picked up this week with the chapter 11 called Gus. We find Joe back at work. He's feeling exhausted, and he admits that he also feels kind of foolish for going through this process with Pindar all week. And so Gus, on his way out of the office, comes in and sits down, and they, just kind of expressing just kind of how dumb and defeated he feels, Joe, through this process. And so in doing that with Gus, he gets credit for doing his homework on authenticity, being authentic. Turns out Gus starts sharing a little of his background, and Joe figures out that Gus is the connector. And Gus tells him how much money he's worth, and Joe almost falls out of his chair. So he's like, why on earth are you still working? Like, what are you doing here? And Gus gives an answer we would all expect, which is that, I love what I do. I don't do it for the money, so I still come in every day. Have any of you discovered someone working around you or in your sphere or in a bubble that was kind of undercover like Gus?
Undercover? No, but I would say that I have people in my sphere who are at a point in their lives where working is not necessary anymore. I mean, I would say I've got a good number of humans that kind of fall in that category, but they still work. And if people knew what they were potentially worth, I think they would question, why are you not living life on a beach, for sure.
I have a handful of relatives and friends that are kind of like that as well. And I mean, my kind of question is usually, well, why? Like, for instance, one of them flips houses on the regular, well enough to take care of him and himself and his family, and works a full-time job. And you ask him why, he's just like, I like it. There's no reason not to, so.
Yeah, I got a buddy from church who he retired like a couple years ago, and he's got a woodworking thing that he does like in his basement. He's got like a bajillion tools and whatever. And man, he's busier now than he was before he retired. But he's like, house is paid off, everything's gravy. I mean, like you said, he could be sitting on the beach right now, but I've seen too many people when they retire, that's it. Man, they retire and they go sit on the beach somewhere. In 3 months, they're gone. So I don't know if that's quite the direction we're supposed to be going with this, but I think that's part of it. Is why, I mean, some people just love the thrill of like being in the game. And if you're in the business of the networking thing where you're helping people and you're introducing people and serving people and taking care of people, I mean, that in itself is the payment. I mean, the money just flows from it. So I don't know. Some people that's the payment, is just being in the game like that.
So I think Laura, that's probably Laura. Would the rest of you actually retire? Do you have a number that would make you stop?
Not right now.
What's retire?
My number is 70. I'm not doing a whole lot past 70. So run and gun until we get to 70.
No. We're all living to 104 and dying on our 104th and one day birthday.
I'm 100. Mine's 107. Correction.
You're
Both me
younger.
and Lexi.
You're younger than I am, so that just means you'll die closer to when I die.
Okay, fair enough. As long as we agree.
And I intend on working until then. Because I agree with Steve.
LOL.
I think the people that find their niche, I think you end up having a longer, happy, healthier life.
I couldn't see myself just not working ever. I could see myself taking a break for an extended period of time, but just not just stopping is weird, It's like, but there's no purpose.
So we'll move on. The next part of the book is about the law of receptivity. And so Joe kind of picks up from talking to Gus. He's trying to figure out almost kind of desperately who the Friday lunch guest is going to be. And so he shows up the next day at Pindar's house and Rachel answers the door and she says, I'm really sorry he's on a call. Have a seat. We'll get to lunch in a minute. And so as they're talking about coffee, he accuses of Gus of being the guest, and it's not Gus. And in talking to Rachel, he's like, it's you, isn't it? And she's like, no, it's not me. Lunch is ready. She kind of was like, oh, go on the terrace. It's ready. I don't want to ruin it. And so, we catch Pindar and Joe having lunch together, and lunch is almost over when Joe realizes that it's almost over and the guest hasn't come yet. So, he's like, who is it? And Pindar admits that it was Joe. It's been Joe all along. And so they spend a lot of time kind of walking through, he makes Joe kind of come up with the answer for the last one. What do you think is the gist of all of this? And what would you call it? And so almost without thinking, Joe calls it the law of receptivity. And for Joe, that's one of the hardest things to grasp. And so Pindar kind of walks him through, all week, Joe has always thought of himself outside of the realm of all of the people he's met, out of all of the kindness and the giving and just the way it's presented to him. He accepts it as a really good idea, but he never really accepts himself within that role. And so, Pindar gives him an analogy that it's like breathing. If I told you that exhaling was healthier than inhaling, you couldn't possibly just inhale or exhale all the time and survive. It has to be reciprocal. You have to have both in balance to keep going. And so I think that kind of eases Joe a little bit because he's still very much not greedy, but trying to figure out how he's going to get the money he needs or wants to achieve. And so Pindar kind of brings it back down into what I'll call real terms. So, he says, having big dreams, being curious, and believing in yourself are all quantities of being receptive. And so they kind of talk about that for a little bit, but I want you guys to tell me, how does receptivity work in our industry? So for example, throughout the process, Joe has to keep giving away. So he gives away business in the first chapter, he gives a referral, he gives time to his wife, and he starts to see small gains. So how does that, breathing in and out for us, have you guys experienced small or large ways of giving and also receiving in our business?
So I've been in a networking group for the last year and a half, and now things are kind of really rolling, not only in getting referrals from them, but to them. But it kind of feels like now that I've been doing this as long as I have, I'm not just the realtor. If you hear somebody give me send them my way, we're building relationships. I can honestly say, the life insurance lady that we work with, I can honestly say, I know this lady, we have worked together, this and that, da, da, da. We're building relationships, and that just, it helps you go deeper when finding people. And at the end of the day, because if you help somebody buy a house, they're probably not ready to sell anything for another 8 years. So you almost have to give and give and give and give and give to help them out, introduce them to people, give them value, but before you get anything in return. It's 8 years, but you have to be to that, and it's taken me a long time to get used to it, but it just is what it is. If you have a big enough group of people you're working with, it all works out.
I think that's true in any sales industry and really in any industry. Somebody once kind of explain this concept to me with a closed fist based on an open fist, right? If your fist is closed and you don't ever give anything away, and it was a class teaching us to let go of some of the jobs, right? Learn how to use leverage, right? But if your fist is consistently closed and you hold on to these jobs and you hold on to these jobs and you hold on to all the information that you have, right? All the knowledge that you've learned. And I think you can apply this to what you're talking about and more than just, learning to use leverage. But if you keep those fists nice and closed, nothing leaves it, which is great because you never lose anything. The problem is nothing else ever comes back in it. And so when you're able to open your fist, you're able to give, you're able to let things flow through your fingers. A lot of times what happens is what comes into your hands is a lot more than what you could ever hold, even with two hands. So then your ability to give back into the world gets greater, and your ability to catch the things that you're trying to capture and achieve your goals gets greater. And so, people ask me, that we talk about this all the time. What is your value proposition? What is your value proposition? What is your value proposition? I've listened to these fabulous agents come up with these fabulous value propositions that have words that I don't even understand what they mean in it. And I feel so uneducated and so not worthy and not up to where they are when I think about mine. But I think mine holds a whole lot more impact. My value proposition is just yes. What is your problem? We will help you figure out what that problem is, right? We help you figure out from beginning to end in the home buying and selling process, but it goes much deeper than that for us, right? And so we know doctors, we know attorneys, I know just about everybody in this area, or at least have a contact for almost every job in this area. And I'm consistently giving that out and consistently referring those people business. So when they think of agents, it's not just my clients that think of my team. It's those interviews that, those companies that we interview and we promote their business. We check in with those companies. How's your business doing? How can we, when we go shopping, we support those businesses. Hey, hadn't seen you in a while. Just in to buy, a pound of shrimp. Hadn't seen you in 2 months or whatever. And so I think when you learn that lesson and you understand it, I think you can really relate to how much it applies to life in every aspect. You can change that to parenting, right? You go help another parent get plugged into a school, or help another parent take care of something that their child needs help taken care of. I guarantee you on the back end, they're going to think about you when the time is right, whether it's for business or, oh, this parent said they needed XYZ. I can help them with that, or this person can help them with that. And I just think, when you use that open and closed hand analogy, it's super easy to think of and see.